Your attention, please. Will everyone please move to the front of the auditorium as much as possible? Thank you.
Good morning. Groups in the back, please do us a favor and move towards the front of the house. We do have some schools that are arriving late, and we want to ensure a smooth transition, so it will help us if you could all move forward, please. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to Kean University. First things first, I know that most of you here today are part of the technology generation and you are never without your phones. And the good news is I am not asking you to get rid of them. But what I am asking is that for the time being, please silence and put them away. We will let you know when it's time to take them out. I also thank everyone for their patience. We have an absolute full house today, and there are 2 more school groups coming in right now. As you know, with all of the schools, sometimes there's traffic and that's life, and so we appreciate everybody's patience in making sure that we could all be here for today's program. So thank you very, very much. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Dr. Adara Goldberg. I am the Executive Director of the Human Rights Institute and the Holocaust Resource and Education Center here at Kean University. The Human Rights Institute was established in 2008 to provide a space to learn about and engage with current events and human rights movements around the globe. We work with faculty, staff, students, and our community to create meaningful learning experiences and programs that shine a light on injustices and empower people to become leaders, change makers, upstanders, who strive to make the world a better place. Our facility features seminar spaces, our Human Rights Institute Gallery, and the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Reflection Garden. One of my favorite parts of our work at the Human Rights Institute is our one-of-a-kind gallery space. Each semester, we feature artwork that showcases human rights through different and unique approaches. Free for students and the community, the gallery is a fantastic way to think about human rights through a lens that most of us don't typically imagine it through. How many people in here, by a show of hands, have been to the Human Rights Gallery? Excellent. Well, I hope that many more of you are able to visit it either today, after the program, or another time. We have an exhibit on view now entitled Journeys of Growth. This is an exhibit by Gen Z artist Waylon Pan. The exhibit runs through May 20th, 2025, and it shows the power of finding your individual identity in a rapidly changing technological world. Here at Kean, we are committed to establishing and maintaining a diverse campus community. As New Jersey's first urban research university and a regional anchor institute, Kean University, which has recently been recognized for its R2 status, encourages our students, faculty, and staff to find new and innovative ways to serve our state and local communities. This is why it is so vital that we host programs like today's conference. As a scholar and a public historian committed to providing accessible education, I am particularly proud to welcome you all here today to our campus. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Senior Vice President and Special Counsel to the President, Felice Vasquez. Thank you.
Good morning, and wow, what a powerful sight it is. This theater filled with people from all walks of life who believe in a promise of a more just future. I am very happy to share that this is the largest crowd we've drawn in over a decade for this conference, even filling overflow space in our North Avenue Academic Building. It's clear that we were correct in our sense that Gen Z is inspired to make a change. As we navigate this rapidly changing world, many of us ask, what drives true change? Is it policy, resources, timing? All of those certainly play a role, but history has shown us that real change is fueled by young people. Their willingness to challenge the status quo and envision a different world. The theme of today's conference, We Are the Future, I should say You Are the Future, How Gen Z is Changing the World, is not just a title, it's happening right now. Gen Z did not inherit a perfect world by any means. They were born into climate crisis, political division, economic uncertainty, and systematic inequality. What makes them remarkable is not what they inherited. It is what they refuse to accept. They refuse to accept that gun violence is inevitable, that racial injustice is unsolvable, that climate catastrophe is unavoidable, and most importantly, that human rights are negotiable. This is youth activism on an entirely different level. Gen Z brings digital savvy, global perspective, and an intersectional awareness like we've never had before, and it's redefining advocacy. Consider our speakers today. When David Hogg and his classmates survived the unthinkable, they did not just grieve. They mobilized 800,000 people in Washington and inspired millions more worldwide. When Tiana Day saw injustice at just 17 years old, she took action, organizing protests, raising scholarships, and amplifying young voices. They are the change we need. Every generation shapes the world, but Gen Z stands at a critical inflection point. Their choices today will define the future for younger generations while dismantling outdated systems that we grew up in and rebuilding better ones for all of us. Our role is to empower the next generation, creating space for their visions, amplifying their voices, and removing barriers to success. That starts with ensuring access to higher education, which is exactly what Kean University does every day. The future is here. Let us embrace it. So I urge you to listen, be challenged, be inspired. Let these young leaders expand your sense of what is possible with tremendous hope for the future. And on behalf of our university president, Dr. Lamont Repollet, it is my honor to officially open Kean University's 17th Annual Human Rights Conference. Enjoy the program.
Throughout history, young people have led the fight for human rights. From the streets to the digital age, each generation has shaped the future, and Gen Z is no different. At Kean's Human Rights Institute, we educate and empower students to advocate for a more just world. We give them tools, we give them knowledge, we inspire them to be leaders of their future.
Human rights means amplifying voices that have been silenced for too long. For Gen Z, that means using our platform to drive real change, whether it's racial injustice, climate action, or mental health resources.
Social media has helped us to organize, educate, and mobilize faster than ever. We're no longer waiting for someone to hand us the mic. We've built our own stage.
At the HRI, I've learned that activism isn't just about protests. It's about daily action, education, and standing up for what we believe in.
At the Human Rights Institute, we believe in the power of young voices. Whether through education, advocacy, or action, we are shaping the future together.
That was an inspiring video. I am so proud to be in a room filled with Gen Z human rights activists. Good morning. My name is Sarah Quakendahl, and I am the Managing Assistant Director of the Holocaust Resource Center and Human Rights Institute here at Kean University. For the 2024-25 academic year, the HRI has engaged Gen Z leaders on and off campus through a series of collaborative and innovative programs. In November, we held our first Human Rights Week with our Senior Human Rights Fellow, Indaba Mandela. Last week, students traveled to South Africa during spring break to visit Indaba and to learn the lessons of his grandfather, Nelson Mandela. Over just the last few days, the HRI has run several events for our second Human Rights Week, including a film screening of I Am Gen Z, a leadership panel discussion titled A Gen Z Approach to Leadership, an ASL Youth Symposium, and a Gen Z Entrepreneurship Fair. As we celebrate the success of these programs with today's conference, I am thrilled to introduce our first speaker, David Hogg. On February, oh yeah. On February 14th, 2018, David Hogg's life changed forever. As a senior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, he lost 17 friends, classmates, and teachers to gun violence. David's eloquent responses to America's largest school shooting immediately placed him in the national and international media spotlight. Committed to becoming an agent for change, he resolved that no other young person should have to experience the tragic impact of gun violence. He and his friends co-founded March for Our Lives, now one of the world's largest youth-led movements. 5 weeks after the shooting, March for Our Lives mobilized one of the biggest demonstrations in the nation's history. Speaking before an estimated 800,000 protesters in Washington, D.C., David declared, "The sun shines on a new day and it is ours." In addition, David is the co-founder of Leaders We Deserve, a New York Times best-selling author, graduated from Harvard University in 2023, and has become one of the most compelling voices of his generation. David's activism has taken him around the country, meeting with impacted families and diverse communities. His call to get over politics and get something done challenges Americans to stand up, speak out, and work to elect morally just leaders, regardless of party affiliation. I am delighted to welcome to the stage David Hogg.
Good morning. When we started speaking out after the shooting, our country was in a very similar place, where we had people who stood against gun safety. In the House, they had a majority. In the Senate, they had a majority, and they also had the White House. And unfortunately, we're back at that same place right now. When the shooting happened, I was actually in my AP Environmental Science class, and our door was open because it was a freezing day in Florida in February. It was 70 degrees. So for once, we didn't need air conditioning. And as a result, we could hear everything going on outside of our classroom. And as I was working on a worksheet with one of my classmates, we heard what sounded like a gunshot outside of our classroom. Because what a lot of people don't understand, and what we'd come to find out, what a lot of people don't understand about our high school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in Parkland, is that it's not like your traditional high school like most of you probably go to. In terms of its physical layout. We're an outdoor school. Our hallways are outside. There are multiple buildings and things like that. And what we would come to find out we were hearing was the echoes of the AR-15 from the freshman building, which was in the building right next to mine. And as we hear what we believe is a gunshot, my classmate and I turn towards each other and we say, "Hey, we think we heard something outside. You should close the door to our teacher." And she does. And right as she does that, the fire alarm starts going off. And we start exiting our classroom, thinking maybe this is a drill, maybe this is, we don't know what it is. As we're doing that, a flood of students start running in the opposite direction of where we were going. And they said, "Don't come this way, he's coming this way." And instinctually, my classmates and I started following those students. Unbeknownst to us at the time, however, we were actually running towards where the shooting was happening, which was in the freshman building. And at this moment, the shooter was in the third floor, and he was attempting to shoot out of the third floor window down at students. And thankfully, the window, miraculously, prevented him from doing that because it was hurricane glass. And right before we got out, right before we got out in front of the freshman building, somebody stopped us and said, "Don't come this way, he's coming this way." So we all ran into our culinary classroom, and that teacher got about 60 students in her classroom in the matter of probably 30 seconds or so. And it was an incredible act of courage because you don't know if there are multiple shooters. You don't know if there are bombs on campus. You don't know what is going on. And all she knew how to do was to protect her students and bring us all in there. And when we got in there, obviously students were incredibly upset. Many of them were distraught and nauseous and having panic attacks. And in that moment, the only thing that I could think how to do was to turn towards my camera. I was a student in TV production. I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. And I knew, because of my experience in speech and debate, that one of the main tactics that was used by the NRA, because I had spent the previous 4 years at different points over the past 4 years, up until that point, when I was a senior, I had to argue about gun control, both for it and against it, throughout my debate classes. So I knew about the arguments in the debate around guns, and I knew one of the main things that happened is this organization called the National Rifle Association, the NRA, that advocates to keep our gun laws weak, often goes out there and says, after these instances of tragedy, that you can't talk about this because you're politicizing tragedy, right? So I wanted to interview my classmates if that was the last thing that we did, not knowing where the shooter was at the time, if there were multiple on campus. So I interviewed them. One, as a way of documenting what may have been the last moments of our life, and two, to make sure that if we did die in our classrooms, that hopefully our voices would carry on and make some kind of change. So I asked the students, what do you think about the NRA? What do you think about gun laws? What do you think about this crisis that's happening in our country? And thankfully that day, I made it out of my classroom along with my classmates that were immediately around me. However, 17 teachers and students, as we'd come to find out, did not, along with 17 others who were injured in the shooting and would come to survive. After the shooting, we were obviously incredibly furious and distraught, but more than anything, we were pissed off, I would say. A lot of the young people were. Because we grew up as a generation seeing this happen over and over and over and over and over and over again, where time and time again, we hear our politicians go out there and tweet out and go on the news and give their thoughts and prayers over and over and again as nothing changes on this. Where they're expecting our teachers and our classmates to be soldiers in the war that they're responsible for creating because of their own lack of courage to stand up and do something. In the following days, we'd come to find out the shooter at our high school was not some kind of criminal mastermind. He was a deranged 19-year-old, white supremacist and anti-Semite who had drawn swastikas on various objects, including some of the magazines of his own gun, that was able to go out and legally purchase an AR-15 at the age of 19 years old. And here's the thing, here's the logic of the NRA. He couldn't go out and purchase a handgun from a federally licensed dealer because he was not 21 yet. But he could go out and purchase an AR-15 at 19 years old because that is their logic, the logic of the NRA. We'd come to find out as well that law enforcement had been called to his house multiple times before the shooting, that he had been reported to the FBI, that he had been reported to local law enforcement, but we didn't have the laws that could have removed the firearm from him in the first place because of lobbying of groups like the NRA and others that prevented that law from being created. So many of my classmates and I came together on a friend's living room floor, and we decided to do something about it. And we decided what we were going to do was to organize a school walkout, like they did throughout the 1960s, starting with a lot of the Chicano students in Los Angeles that led one of the first student walkouts in American history to protest school segregation. So taking inspiration from that movement, we decided we were going to do a walkout a month after the shooting. And we decided about a month and a half after the shooting, on March 24th, that we were going to go out and have a protest in Washington, D.C. And we were going to call it March for Our Lives, to show the public support for this issue and to register voters and counter this notion, because we heard from so many people after the shooting, it's terrible what happens to you young people when you go through these things, but you don't vote. So it doesn't matter, because ultimately until you start voting, which you're not going to, nothing's going to change here. And like all teenagers, we like nothing more to do than to prove the older people wrong, right? So we organized and we showed up at our state capitol. Even though we were told by people, you can't talk about the NRA, you can't talk about banning assault weapons, you can't talk about so many of these things because they aren't popular here, we did just that. And guess what? Because we had the courage to stand up and actually say what needed to be done on this issue, We actually did change gun laws in Florida. Despite what all the pollsters, consultants, and pundits said to us, we raised the age to buy a gun in our state to 21, and we passed what's called a red flag law. That can disarm somebody that is a risk to themselves and others. And that law, since Parkland, has been used in one instance to save my own mother's life. There was a man that threatened to kill my own mother that sent a letter to her that said, F with the NRA and you'll be DOA. Mind you, I was 17 years old. My sister was 14, and we were getting threats like this. Because of the law that we passed after Parkland, we were able to disarm the man that threatened to kill my own mother, that lived just 20 minutes away from us. And that same law has been used over 19,000 times in Florida since the shooting, saving thousands of lives. Because we had the courage, as young people, to stand up and actually say, no, we don't care about your thoughts and prayers. We want action. We need action. Because we've gotten enough of your thoughts and prayers, and that is why we're still in this position. So you need to do something. And they actually did. But we didn't just stop there. We ended up organizing the March for Our Lives in D.C. that we thought was going to have 90 people or so show up to it. And within the first hour or so of us posting it, we had 10,000 people sign up to march with us. And then the next day, it was 50,000. And then it just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And eventually, we had students around the country ask us, well, I can't make it to D.C. Can I host my own March for Our Lives in my city? And we said, sure. So then we created a sister march program for marches to happen around the country. And at the end of that 6-week period after the shooting, when we had the March for Our Lives, we ended up having the largest student protest ever in American history, with nearly 1 million people march with us in Washington, D.C., and millions more march with us around the country, and on every single continent except the one with penguins. Pretty good for a group of dumb young people that don't know what they're doing, right? But look, we didn't stop there. We heard the older people that said that we didn't vote, and we knew that we needed to prove them wrong. So we went out and registered tens of thousands of young people to vote around the country. We heard from people, well, you're never going to get anything changed in Congress because they just have too much power there. So we said, okay, watch us. So we went on a tour around the country called the Road to Change, where we registered tens of thousands of young people to vote in key congressional districts around the country, where we knew if we turned out young people, the young people who marched with us, the young people who walked out with us, if we got them to turn out and vote just 5 or 10% more, that we could flip those seats and take them away from the NRA. Because we did that, we ended up defeating more NRA-backed incumbents than ever before in American history. And in 2018, we had the largest youth voter turnout of any non-presidential midterm in American history, ever. And surveys afterwards showed that 40% of the young people between the ages of 18 and 29 that voted in that election said they were highly motivated by participating in the March for Our Lives, the largest student protest in American history. But we didn't just stop there. We eventually had to go to college. And as I was going to college, I remember this very distinctly. I was in my freshman year, and I had to take a full immersion Spanish class in order to be able to graduate, which for a dyslexic is not easy. And I needed to hire somebody to help replace a lot of the work that I was doing at March for Our Lives so I could focus on school. So I called up a young man that had helped us organize some of the first marches around Florida named Maxwell. And I said to Maxwell, hey, I really need you to, I'd love if you take this job and become our organizing director for our organization, help organize our protests around the country, do lobbying and different efforts like that. He's like, yeah, that sounds great, but I don't think I can take that job right now. I was like, okay, I understand. And then the next day, I flunked a Spanish test. And I called Maxwell and I said, you don't understand. I really need you to take this job because I need to pass this Spanish class in order to be able to graduate. And then he said yes. And Maxwell, his first protest that he did with us with March for Our Lives was in the Virginia state capitol. We had gained a majority in the House, Senate, and gained the governor for the first time, I think, in a decade. And it was our first opportunity to be able to pass gun laws there. And as our students, high school students, mind you, were getting ready to show up and lobby in Richmond at the state capitol to be able to change gun laws in Virginia, they started getting death threats from people saying, if you show up here, we're going to kill you. And I got a call from Maxwell, and he said, I don't think that we can do this. We're going to be endangering these students. It's too dangerous. And I said, I understand that, but we still have to show up because we cannot let these people win. Because there was also a planned armed counter-protest of 20,000 people, including Alex Jones and other white supremacists who were planning on showing up to protest the change of these gun laws. Because that is how intimidated they were by these young people practicing their First Amendment rights, that they had to try to use their second in a form of armed intimidation to infringe upon our rights, to make our voice heard. And we said, I can't even say what I want to say. We said, screw that. And what I said to Maxwell is, I get that. What if we got college students from around Virginia that are more willing to risk their lives to show up not that day, but show up the night before at the state legislature and spend the night on their on a few legislators' office floors, and then get up the next morning, go and lobby, and get out of there before the armed counter-protesters show up. And Maxwell's like, you're crazy. That is not going to happen. I said, well, here are some of their phone numbers, who we met on that road tour we did. Just give them a call and ask. So he gave them a call, and they actually said yes. And Maxwell led these students, while there were armed protesters showing up outside, led several dozen students to help change gun laws across Virginia in partnership with many of the survivors from Virginia Tech and so many other shootings around Virginia, to change gun laws for the first time in over a decade in Virginia. And Maxwell's 23 years old when he did that, mind you. A few years later, Maxwell called me up, and he said, David, I have good news and I have bad news. And he said, the bad news is I'm leaving March for Our Lives. And I said, it's okay, I passed my Spanish class. The good news is I want to run for Congress. And I said to Maxwell, you know you're 24, right? You have to be 25 to be elected to Congress. And he said, yes, I know, I'll be old enough by the time I'm elected. And Maxwell hadn't graduated college at this point. He doesn't come from a wealthy family. He's adopted. He's Afro-Latino. He's not somebody who traditionally has the type of resources that most people need at any age, let alone 24, to get elected to Congress. And I said, Maxwell, you know I don't trust politicians, right? But I trust you, because I don't see you as a politician, I see you as a friend. I know that you're in this for the right reasons. So I ended up supporting Maxwell in that race, and throughout his race, he had to Uber drive every night from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m., every single night, as he was running for Congress. And as he was doing this, one of the things that we were advocating for with the White House was to create something called the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, to help coordinate the federal government's response to gun violence. Because even though we spend hundreds of millions of dollars to fight gun violence, do research on it, and other things like that, there's no central point within the federal government with somebody whose entire job it is to make sure all the agencies that we have are coordinated, and all the states that are able to get money to fight gun violence actually know that money is actually available. And it was a very frustrating time, to be honest with you. I got told no many times, but we continued to persist. And Maxwell, as I was having these conversations, as he was running for Congress, ended up getting more and more traction in his race, and he ended up winning his election, defeating 2 former members of Congress, one of whom had committed tax fraud while they were in Congress. The other was a hedge fund manager while they were in Congress. Just what we need more of, right? And Maxwell became the first Gen Z member of Congress, Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost. And the first bill that Maxwell introduced was to create the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And that was enough to put pressure on the White House to end up creating that office. And within a year of Maxwell being elected, I went from just seeing him on a Zoom screen in my dining hall while I was on kitchen cabinet calls, a year and a half before, figuring out how we could raise the next $2,000 or $3,000, to watching him introduce the President of the United States for the announcement of the creation of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention at the White House. And throughout that time period, one other thing that happened was the Uvalde shooting as well. And after Uvalde, we knew that we had to continue the momentum because we had enough power now through the work that we'd done and having the highest youth voter turnouts in American history. We gained back the White House, we gained the House, and we gained with a slim majority the Senate. we knew that we had to do something and we had to mobilize. So we decided to do a second March for Our Lives around the country to keep the pressure on. And we showed up as well outside of there were 10 senators basically that we needed to get to be able to break through this archaic rule that's very dumb and should be abolished called the filibuster. And I showed up outside of different senators' offices, rallying hundreds of people, thousands of people around the country outside of these different senators' offices to put pressure on them with their constituents to demand action on gun violence. And I kept saying throughout this time period, I know that this time is going to be different. And I would say that on the news, and one of the questions I get back is, how do you know that this time is going to be different? And the reason why is because of the experience that I had in Dallas, Texas. As you can imagine, I'm not very popular there, right? And in 2018, when we were doing a road tour there, when our tour went through there and we were having a town hall, there were about 40 armed counter-protesters that showed up to protest us, screaming that we were crisis actors, that we were here to take everybody's guns, that, were paid by people as part of some massive conspiracy to take people, just ridiculous stuff that they were promoting. And they were armed with AR-15s, handguns, and various other weapons. And that had happened many times that I had been in Dallas, Texas. There had been those armed counter-protesters. And at one point, I went out and talked to them when we had that town hall. And I said, what are you doing here right now? And they said, well, you're here to take my guns. And I said, well, are you trying to hurt yourself or somebody else? And they said, no. And I said, then I'm not. But let me ask you this. Do you think that a 19-year-old in your community here in Dallas, if he threatened to shoot up a high school, your local high school here, do you think that he should be able to continue to legally own an AR-15 like the one that you're holding right now? He said, no, of course not. And I said, well, great, then you agree with me. And throughout the series of this conversation, of course, he's not going to agree to banning something like the weapon that he's holding, but he ended up crying in that conversation because he realized that the people that he was protesting really were basically just kids that didn't want their friends to die in their schools. And when I went back to Dallas after Uvalde, and I was protesting outside of one of these senators' offices, there was not a single armed counter-protester for the first time that I had done anything in Texas. And the message that we had after Uvalde is, look, we know that our country has our disagreements on this issue, but the reality is we all do agree we need to do something here. So let's figure out what we can agree on and move forward. And in part because of that messaging and the work of thousands of survivors around the country and millions of people who marched with us and protested, we ended up passing the first federal gun law in 30 years. And what this law did is it was bipartisan. It was called the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Republicans and Democrats voted for it. And what this law did is it didn't raise the age to buy a gun to 21, but it expanded background checks for people under the age of 21 to buy guns like the AR-15. The other thing that this law did is we hear all the time from the NRA and, frankly, Republicans, this idea that this is just an issue of mental health, right? Oftentimes, we hear this in the wake of things like the shooting in Buffalo, New York, that was committed by a self-declared white supremacist. And they use this idea of mental health as a scapegoat to avoid talking about the hatred that drives so many of these shootings. And unlike a lot of colleagues across the aisle, Democrats actually put their money where their mouth was. And we put in hundreds of millions, actually billions of dollars into school mental health programs to fund them and hire, it was over 10,000 school guidance counselors and mental health counselors to help our students in their schools. But they didn't just stop there. They also allocated hundreds of millions of dollars to focus on programs that stop people from wanting to kill each other in the first place, right? Because even if you can't get access to a weapon and you want to harm somebody else, that's still a problem. So we invested hundreds of millions of dollars into what are called community violence intervention programs that focus on getting the young people most at risk of committing an act of gun violence, getting them a job, getting them counseling, getting them support from the faith community or others so that they don't go down that path. And the progress that we've seen in the passage of that law and the creation of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention is pretty remarkable, which is that in the past 2 years, in 2023, the first year the Office of Gun Violence Prevention was created, we saw the single largest one-year reduction in gun homicides in American history of 12%, which is nowhere near enough to be clear, but that's a hell of a lot better than the track that we were on previously. And in the year after that, in 2024, we saw about a 14% reduction in gun homicides as well. So all in all, in the matter of 2 years since the passage of that law, because Democrats and Republicans came together and actually did something, we've seen gun homicide get reduced by about 25% in the past 2 years, which is nowhere near enough. But here's the challenge. One of the biggest challenges that we're going to have with this issue is you're not going to hear about the shooting that doesn't happen, right? And there's so much more work to do, but what I want to leave you with is that we are making progress on this issue, but it is not guaranteed that it's going to continue. And what it's going to rely on to continue is younger people like yourselves taking the initiative and standing up and being part of this movement to help address gun violence and also address not just gun homicides and mass shootings like we see in the news all the time, but also address the roughly 55 to 60% of gun deaths that are gun suicides that happen in this country, that unfortunately touch so many people and are preventable. Because we know most people who survive their first suicide attempt do not reattempt. But with a firearm, you don't get that second chance almost ever. So the method really matters. What this movement needs is for you all to step up and have the faith that change actually is possible. I mean, raise your hand if you've gone through a school shooter drill. The older people should look around the room right now. Keep your hands up. Exactly. We are raising a traumatized generation, but it is going to have to be our generation that stands up and helps to fix this issue. And I know that we will, because history tells us that we will. And it's not going to be because Democrats all of a sudden gain a massive majority or because Republicans get their act together on this. It's going to be because the people in this room, this generation, forces both parties to get their act together and do the right damn thing and address this crisis once and for all, because other countries don't have anybody in this room raise their hand when they're asked if they've gone through a school shooter drill, because school shootings in other countries are not nearly as prominent as they are here. And it's not because they arm their teachers. It's not because their doors open outward instead of inward. It's not because they have safe corners in their classroom. It's because they did something about the damn guns. And look, I understand that there's very strong feelings about this, obviously. When I was in college, I joined the shooting club. And it's not because I was the most popular person there. It's because I wanted to talk to the people who disagreed with me most and figure out what we can agree on so we can move forward. And what I'll tell you from my experience there is what's not going to change this issue is just screaming at each other and calling each other names. It might feel good to some people, but ultimately it's not going to make us progress. And what I would urge you all as younger people to do is remember that as good as it might feel to call somebody names, as good as it might feel to scream at them, and certainly I've done that plenty of times with our politicians, and I will continue to do it. When you're having these one-on-one conversations with people that don't agree with you, the point isn't necessarily to make progress. You don't have to fully convince somebody. When I was in the shooting club, one time we were in a competition against MIT, Northeastern, Yale, the Coast Guard Academy, and West Point. We lost horribly, thank God. But in the middle of this competition, the coach who didn't coach the team very much came over to me, and he was a former Olympic skeet shooter. He's about 6'3", and he's like a walking refrigerator. He's ripped. And he comes over to me, and he says, "What's your name?" And mind you, as he's saying this, I have a 12-gauge shotgun cracked over my shoulder because we're in the middle of this competition. And I say, "David." And mind you, I had a beard at the time. I had my range glasses on too. I looked like a Republican. And he said, "What's your last name?" And I say, "David Hogg." And he's holding up my Wikipedia page on his phone as he's having this conversation with me. He's like, "What are you doing here? You're here to take my guns? You're here to protest us?" And I was like, I'm here for the shooting competition. But I'm also here because I think that you may have some assumptions about me, clearly, that are not entirely accurate. And I may have some about you that are not entirely accurate. Now, I know that you may not agree with banning a gun like the AR-15, but I have to assume that you don't want school shootings or gun violence to continue either, right? He's like, "Yeah, of course not." Well, I was like, "Great. you probably do agree with me that we need more mental health funding for the 2/3 of gun deaths that are suicides in this country, right? And he's like, yeah, of course. I said, great. Then you agree with me on that. Now, we could either try to debate this and go nowhere, or you could help me become a better shot. What do you want to do? And then I went and nailed all the clay pigeons because my dad was an FBI agent, and I've been shooting guns since I was in 4th grade. And all of a sudden, he's like, you know, I kind of like you, basically. And through many conversations that I've had like that in person and online, what I have learned is that what is far more gratifying than calling somebody a name, if somebody comes to you and is very disrespectful or calls you a name or says something to you in your, DMs or in person or something like that, your first instinct is to respond with the same energy, right? And it's not to say that it's not justified. If somebody comes to me and says that the shooting at my high school wasn't real, I am very justified in telling that person in very colorful language what they should go do with themselves, right? However, is that going to make progress? No, it's not. And the job of us as a generation, if we want to make political change, I know there's this idea that has become very prevalent in recent years that it's not my job to educate you. If you were in politics, it is your damn job to educate people. It is your damn job to have uncomfortable conversations with people, because if you don't, somebody else who you don't agree with will, and they will educate them, and it's not going to be in the way that you want. And it's not to say that you should have to have that conversation. If you don't want to, you just shouldn't be in politics. I hope you still vote, but that's the truth of the matter. When somebody says that to me, though, I say, look, I can respect that you don't agree with me, but I can't respect that you don't want school shootings or gun violence to continue either, and act like there isn't anything that we could agree on. And then they try to egg me on more, of course, and call me more things. And I'm like, look, I'm here to have a conversation. Is there anything that I could say to you, any amount of statistics or data or anything like that, or stories that could change your mind? And they say no. I say, well, then I'm not going to bother trying to change your mind. So why don't we focus on what we can agree on here? And if they continue the conversation, in every one of these conversations that I've had, every single one of them, they end up apologizing to me. And that feeling, even if they don't end up agreeing with me, is so much more gratifying of making somebody else, and pardon my French here, making somebody else feel like an asshole because of what they said to you is far more gratifying than just yelling at them. Because it also opens up the opportunity for them to change their mind in the future. Because they're expecting me to call them names back, they're expecting me to hate them and disrespect them. But when you show somebody like that any basic level of respect, even if they don't deserve it, it starts to change their worldview. It shatters the in-group and out-group that they have created in their minds that have kept us so divided on this issue. And I've had people that have said those things to me about the school shooting, not about us not being real, or just people that said awful things to me because they didn't agree with me, come back to me and say, you know what, David, I'm really happy that we've continued to have this conversation because I actually agree with you now. Or I may not agree with you fully on everything, but I really respect you in the conversation that we had. And that is how we make progress on this. It can't just happen online, it needs to be in person too. But it's by realizing that even though there are so many things that many people don't agree on this issue, there is a lot of stuff we do that we've got to work on, that we've got to make progress on, because as we continue to debate it, people are going to die. And it's not just Democratic kids that are dying in these shootings, it's also Republican kids and independents. They're kids. It rises above party. And what I hope to do going forward is show people that we can make progress on this, because we are. And it's hard because you're not going to hear about that shooting that doesn't happen, but I'm telling you, we are making progress on it around the country. And what I really hope that you take away from this conversation more than anything, if you're a young person, is that if you see something wrong in this world, if you have something that you're passionate about, go and work on it and realize you're going to fail a million times. I certainly have. But ultimately, if you keep going, you eventually will succeed. Because what you need to succeed more than anything isn't to be a Nobel laureate. It's not to be brilliant. It's not to go to a super fancy school. It's not even going to college. Sorry to the teachers in the room. You should go to college if you can. But it's grit. It's the determination to keep going in the face of obstacles and pick yourself up and keep fighting every single time. Because the reality is you can do everything right in politics to make change that is within your control and still fail. But that's not because of you. That's because of factors external to you. But as young people, you have the greatest asset on your side that anybody can have in life, in politics, in business, or anything else, which is time on your side. You have the time to fail and learn. And guess what? We have that advantage too in politics. Because as much as you might hate today's politicians, ultimately you're going to outlive them. Thank God. The question is, in this moment, are you going to be part of history in bringing our country out of this dark moment and into the light and into the promises that we have always professed but continue to fail to live up to? Are you going to be part of the generation that stands up? We are the first generation, and this is not news to any of you that are younger in this room. We are the first generation that is worse off economically than our parents. The first generation in American history to be like that. That's bullshit. But guess what? The people in power are not going to change that themselves because they benefit from it staying that way. The only thing that can change it is you all standing up and being part of it. Are you going to do that? Are you going to do that? Because more than just this issue on gun violence, the corruption that has pervaded our society is so endemic and disgusting. The only thing that can change it is a mass movement of young people that stand up and actually say, we're not going to let things continue this way, and we're not going to let the next generation be worse off than us. We're not going to let the next generation go through school shooter drills because our politicians failed to have the damn courage to do the right thing. We're not going to let the next generation continue to live with the climate crisis and the housing crisis, because as a generation, we stood up and we rebuilt the American dream. Because I know right now that this moment feels incredibly dark, because it is. It is incredibly painful to see what so many people are going through. As scientists are fired, as our veterans are called parasites, and so much more. But ultimately, the only reason they are going to be able to get away with this and continue to act like this and the corrupt politicians are going to stay there is if you believe that this has gotten so bad that there is nothing that you can do about it. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. If we believed that after Parkland, we never would have changed anything. So my question to you is, are you going to be part of that change? You have to be. Because the people that are counting on us right now are not in this room. They aren't even alive yet. Because it's the kids that will come after you that are going to be sitting in these same chairs in the future. And the question that you must ask yourself is whether or not when they are there, are they going to be sitting through a lesson about how messed up our country is and how corrupt it is? Or are they going to be sitting through a lesson learning how this generation stood up and fixed it? Because we can, and I know that we will, if we can do one thing. And it's what Dolores Huerta told me at a protest a few years ago. That is the most important lesson that I hope that you all take from today. Which is that the only way we are going to be able to make change, the most important thing that you need to be able to create change is not a shitload of money. That's helpful. But more than money, more than time, more than grit, it is the belief that change actually is possible. And what I ask you to do today is to be part of rebuilding the next American century, because it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take many elections. It's going to take many of you running for office. It's going to take many of you stepping up and being part of the change that you want to see. But regardless of where it is, if it's in your school, if it's in your community, wherever it is, take charge and do something. Don't just stand on the sidelines and complain. Fix it. Because if you don't, nobody else will. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David, for such inspiring words and a powerful message about leadership. My name is Mindy Goldstein, and I am the program coordinator at the Human Rights Institute. Historically, young people have been agents of change. To that end, Kean University's Human Rights Institute offers a pre-college program specifically for high school students looking to elevate their voices and build the tools needed to become a more effective advocate and ally. Contact the Human Rights Institute for more information or to register. There are special rates for school groups, so reach out. Tiana Day is a 22-year-old founder and executive director of Youth Advocates for Change, a nonprofit organization on a mission to amplify young voices and inspire agencies through service, art, intersectional advocacy, and entrepreneurship. Under her leadership, the organization has implemented transformative programs in schools across the country, allowing young people to pioneer projects that bridge the gap between art and activism. Tiana's efforts have been recognized internationally, awarded the CNN Hero of the Year, Young Wonder Award, and named a Golden State Impact Warrior. She is the co-author on the Allstate Foundation research project titled In Our Own Voices, which explores effective ways to leverage youth services. Tiana has been a keynote speaker at conferences like South by Southwest EDU and has raised over $30,000 in scholarships for youth leaders. As she continues to advocate for systemic change, she encouraged fostering collaboration among educators, mentors, and youth to create a brighter future that leads with love and centers empathetic leadership. It is my privilege to introduce Tiana Day.
Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to see so many young people up here just sharing space today. I'm going to talk a lot about leading with love. There we go. I'm going to talk about empathetic leadership, leading with love, and I hope that some of you will be able to resonate with my story. It starts when I was 17 years old, just a senior in high school, which most of you are probably around that age right now. At 17 years old, I was the student that was disengaged. I was uninterested in learning. I skipped school a lot. I was suspended. And a lot of my teachers told me they never saw me having an option of going to college because my GPA was too low. Honestly, if you would have asked me to describe myself when I was 17 and the things I was going through, I felt unseen, unheard, unloved, undervalued, and I didn't feel like I had a space to be myself. I went to a high school that lacked representation, being one of the only black students at the school, and that took a huge toll on my self-confidence. I experienced a lot of microaggressions, I experienced a lot of racism, not only from my peers, but also from educators. And it isolated me and made me feel like these experiences only belonged to me and no one else could relate to it. During high school, I often isolated myself. I sat by myself at lunch, kind of like they do in the movies. And I felt like I was the only one having these experiences, and when I looked around, I couldn't talk to anyone about these things. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago, COVID in 2020, when we were all in isolation, and I felt more isolated more than ever. I struggled with mental health issues of anxiety and depression, and didn't know who I was and what I was called to do, especially being a senior that was supposed to graduate in a few months. Prom was canceled, graduation was canceled, and I felt like I lacked so much purpose. But one thing that did come out of 2020 was the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And seeing so many young people throughout history leading movements, being at the forefront of change, inspired me to take my lived experiences and share them, because I thought maybe someone else would be able to resonate. I decided 3 days after high school that I would lead a protest across the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, where I grew up. I didn't think anyone was going to show up. I honestly thought maybe it'd be like 10 or 15 people, so I literally brought like 3 cases of water bottles, thinking I can give it out to everyone. But that didn't matter. It didn't matter how many people showed up. What mattered was I knew in my heart my experience mattered, and there were other young people out there who felt the same exact way. The only thing that was on my heart was to take action in that moment. But that day, on June 6th in 2020, I ended up leading the largest protest in California for Black Lives Matter, with over 50,000 people who showed up to support with a message of leading with love. Now, reminder, I just graduated high school like 3 days before this. I had no kind of leadership experience, no involvement in social justice, and honestly didn't really have an interest in it because I didn't see myself represented in these spaces. It was through art, through film, through photography, through journalism that I actually got to learn about my history, and I got to learn about what made me, me. I saw other people throughout history leading social justice movements, and I thought maybe I could do the same. And so 18 hours before this happened, I actually went down the stairs in my pajamas, and I was like, Mom, Dad, I'm gonna lead a protest tomorrow. And they're like, no, you're not. Like, who do you think you are? And I'm like, I think I have experiences that are valued, and I think they're valid because I see other people throughout history, whether it was the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, any social justice movement that young people are at the forefront of, and I see myself represented in that through these documentaries we're watching on Netflix because, COVID. And my parents literally said, you need to stay home, you need to, it's dangerous out there, you could get sick, you could bring the sickness to our family. And I said, I have to. It just felt like I had no choice. And it was almost as if there was a calling on my life, like if I didn't do this, then other people would continue to suffer inequities because of my disobedience to my calling. And so I told them I'm gonna go regardless if you support me or not. And the next morning, I went to Safeway and I got 3 cases of water bottles, thinking I can give it out to every single person who came. And my parents stopped me and said, we're gonna come with you. And that day I showed up to the Golden Gate Bridge after just posting a little graphic on social media on Instagram, which, by the way, got like maybe 100 likes. And I'm thinking, few people are gonna show up. And over 50,000 people showed up. And I didn't know this, seeing on my social media account, but what I didn't know is there's so much power in just sharing our experiences, sharing these ideas that we have. And someone else ended up seeing my flyer for the protest, reposted it, and it went viral on their account. So when I showed up that day, I'm surrounded by thousands and thousands of people, and an interviewer comes up to say, are you Tiana Day, the leader of this protest? And I'm thinking, yeah, what are these people here for? And they said they're here to march alongside you. And they're here to allow their experiences also to be a part of what we're all doing collectively. And that was the day that I realized this is so much greater than myself, this is so much greater than our own experiences, but it's about sharing space with people who have intersectional identities, intersectional experiences. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have empathy and love at the center of what we're doing when we're leading movements, when we're making community, it doesn't matter who has told you what and what projections people have put onto you. If you have the passion and the purpose in your heart, then you can create some kind of change. And that's called agency. So after I got off this protest, off the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, I ended up deciding, like, what am I going to do next? What's the next step to this? And I decided I would start a nonprofit. Mind you, 17 years old, I can't even legally sign my name on a piece of paper, right? I just graduated high school. I'm feeling so riled up. I'm seeing so many people support and ask how they can get involved in a movement. And I start this organization called Youth Advocates for Change. Funny enough, I didn't know that this was my calling. I didn't know this was my purpose. But when I was on an interview, someone asked, what's your next step? You're young, you just graduated high school. Are you gonna go to college? And reminder, I didn't have the grades to make it to college. I didn't have the experience. My teachers and my parents even told me things that made me feel like I wasn't capable of doing certain things. But what came out of my mouth that day was something that I could never prepare for. I said, I'm gonna start a nonprofit. And they're like, what's it gonna be called? I said, check my Instagram tonight. I'm gonna post about it. And I got off that interview, and my dad said, well, you have to be a woman of integrity now. You gotta do it. And I'm like, I don't know how to start a nonprofit. Why'd I say that? Oh my gosh, I just lied on television. I'm so embarrassed. And I'm so glad that I did what Nike says and I just did it, you know? I like showed up and I posted something and I said, I don't know what this is gonna be about yet, but I know that this is just a moment of my life and it needs to turn into something that has long-term change. It has to be greater than me. And that was the founding story of how I began a nonprofit organization that focuses on intersectional social justice issues. Because although my lived experiences started with racism and microaggressions and feeling othered, there's so many other students out here like you guys who have experiences maybe with the climate crisis, maybe with gender issues, maybe with other experiences that also deserve space for change making. One of my biggest takeaways from being a young founder was realizing that our power truly lies in our lived experiences. So many people had told me, you know, because you don't have all of this experience, you haven't graduated college yet, maybe you should wait till you're 18 to start this organization, maybe you should wait till you get your undergrad degree, just do something. Why are you in such a rush to start? And for me, I felt like my lived experiences were enough. Had I not gone through enough trauma, had I not gone through enough pain, had I not gone through enough experiences in order to allow me to be valid for the things that I felt. And I started realizing there were so many different lived experiences I have that people probably also share. And so these are some things that I knew walking into this. I didn't need a degree necessarily. I didn't need to know everything. I just had to have the passion and the purpose in my heart to understand I can do something with the experiences I've had. And so step one was pain turns into purpose. When we look at different social justice movements, again, like I mentioned earlier, usually they're birthed from a moment of pain. Usually our purpose is birthed from a moment of deep trauma. When we look at our childhoods, everyone has something that happened. Or when we look at our teenage years, everyone has something that happened. Everyone has something that we're constantly going through that is forming us to be the people we're called to be. But most of that time, people allow it to stifle them and to be that ceiling where they can't break through. And so I say, for every single change maker who becomes critically aware there's a problem that's happening, they come to the what if phase. The what if I do this and people support me? And what if I do this and people support me? And what if I don't do this? How many more people are going to be affected by my silence? And that's why I always talk about this idea of pain turning into our purpose. We can take something positive from those negative experiences, and we can actually transform lives of people who have similar moments and memories that we do if we change the way that we look at it. Another thing is that young people have nothing to lose, but also we have everything to lose at the same exact time. When I thought about myself in high school, being at this brink of my career, like, well, I could start this organization, or I can go to college, or I can do this, it felt like there were so many different endless possibilities. But at the same time, there were so many people who were dying at the hands of police. There were so many people who were dying at the hands of injustice, not only in the Black Lives Matter movement, but in so many different movements, in so many different spaces. And for young people, we come to this kind of like crippling moment of, if I do something, maybe it can make an impact, but if I do something, maybe no one is going to support me also. And so I was in that in-between of like, everything is on the line, but also like, maybe nothing is also on the line. And so there's this point of confusion, and I understood that young people deal with this. This is something we constantly battle back and forth, is like, do these things matter? And do they just matter to me, or do they matter to my peers? Do they matter to my parents? Do they matter to my mentors, my teachers? We feel this like sense of isolation, where it's that brink moment of, I can do something, or I can sit back and be silent. And the last thing is that activism is intersectional. And when we look at the different social justice movements, the intersections, the ways that all these different issues kind of intersect at the end of the day, they all come down to people are being affected, human rights, and people are every single day not only losing their lives, but losing their purpose, losing their inspiration, losing the reason that they were put here. And I always say, like, activism is highly spiritual. If we don't know and we're not in touch with ourselves and our own experiences and who we are, who we're called, and who we're created to be, how are we destined to make the change and affect the people that we're called to do? Every single person has purpose in this world. Every single person has been put through different experiences, different pain moments, different traumas, in order to allow that to be the thing, the catalyst moment that motivates them to take action. And like I said, for me, it was one thing, but for you, it's something completely different. And that's one thing that we have to look at ourselves at in the mirror every single day and say, am I going to allow this pain and this trauma to rule my life? Or am I going to allow it to be the motivating factor that propels me into creating a life of service in order to create better spaces for my community? I have a few lessons that I've learned when it comes to empathetic leadership and truly like leading with love, positioning your heart posture in a space of empathy and compassion. Because so often we think of how many problems there are in the world and we want to attack them all. But really, when we kind of niche down and we understand how we fit into the lived experience, how we fit into that social justice movement, how we have value in these certain spaces, we're actually able to create more change. And so one of the first takeaways that I have is when we organize for others, solutions should be co-created by centering the voices and the stories of those who are affected. When you figure out what your purpose is, when you figure out what that passion is and how you want to serve your community through your lived experiences, take into a consideration that there's other people who also have those lived experiences. And it's so important that we center those voices. When we conduct research, when we talk to our peers, when we create donation drives and start organizations, the people at the core center of that solution should be the people who are affected. And I talk about this a lot in education. We see a lot of maybe teachers who are creating solutions for students without having student voices centered. We see a lot of institutions, we see a lot of policies being passed that don't have the communities and the people affected at the center of them. And so I have to ask these institutions, I have to ask these teachers and these educators and these people of power, how do you expect these programs and these solutions to resonate with your community if they aren't part of that conversation? And so for young people, for students, I encourage you guys to actually center yourselves, take on those leadership positions, ask to be given those leadership positions, because we have to create those spaces for ourselves if they're not already created. There's ways that we can implement advisory boards. There's ways we can bring in youth councils. There's ways that we can create space for ourselves if historically they haven't been created before. And that's actually the power of community. That's actually the power of centering your own voice and your own story and your own lived experience, because you have to understand it's not just your experience. Every single person next to you is a mirror of your own lived experience. Every time you get irritated by the person sitting next to you or your parent or something, they are a mirror of your own lived experiences and the things that you haven't dealt with in yourself. When we look at ourselves as that core, that center of understanding, not only does my experience matter, but also recognize if my experience matters, that means the person next to me, their experience also matters, then we're able to create a more empathetic environment that encourages and promotes agency and leadership. Another note I have is that people can't thrive where they don't feel safe. There's a conversation of psychological safety that I think that gets kept out of a lot of conversations when it comes to creating programs and being a change maker. Psychological safety is that ability to be authentically yourself. How many of us go into rooms every single day or go into classrooms even and don't feel safe to actually speak our truth, actually be real and be raw and be honest about the ugly things that happen in our day-to-day lives? There's not enough safe spaces for us. There's not enough environments that cultivate that community feel and allow us to feel like it's okay to take off our mask. Every single day we wake up and we put this mask on. We put on this armor and don't allow people to see the true us. Many of us are dealing with anxiety, we're dealing with depression, we're dealing with other kind of problems in our life, and we want to hide behind it because it feels safer to do that. But I want to encourage you to think about, what if we decided to all take off that skin, take off that flesh, and truly show through what we are called to do? What if we really were authentic about our experiences and authentic about those moments that have changed and been catalytic moments of our lives that allow us to figure out who we truly are inside, why this pain has turned into the purpose, why this pain has created the person that you are today. It doesn't have to be the end of the road when you realize that there's things that you're dealing with that are ugly on the inside. But sometimes it could be that thing that liberates the person next to you because you were willing to have that conversation and you were willing to talk about it when every single person in their life wanted to keep it in. Finally, empathy starts when we stop pretending to be perfect. Empathy is that compassion that we have for each other. Empathy is that understanding of who I am called to be matters. My experiences matter. The things that I went through in high school were not unique to me. They're actually the same experiences my sisters are going to go through if I don't speak up. And I always tell the students that I work with is that just look at me as a big sister figure. Look at me as a sibling. Look at me as your friend. I'm only 5 years removed from high school, genuinely. Like, I was in the same position you guys are in. And at that moment, when I was in your guys' seats, I didn't speak up because I didn't feel empowered. I felt like every single person around me looked at me as an outsider. And instead, I've turned my life into a career of finding those people who feel like outsiders and bringing them on the inside and saying, I feel exactly what you feel, and you aren't alone. Empathy starts when we stop pretending that perfection is something that we're capable of striving for. It's so cliche, but it's so true. And somehow we still try to walk around with all of this baggage, carrying it like it's in trash bags. But you can't make space for other people if you're holding your trash everywhere you go. You gotta let it go sometimes. You have to release it. And this isn't just about one person, it's about all of us. Again, it's about us being mirrors to each other's and understanding, I have some junk on my end, you may have some junk on your end, but there's space for that conversation to be had. There's space for us to do healing work together. Activism is supposed to be healing. It's supposed to be liberating. It's supposed to be that freedom space where you can actually step into your truth, step into your calling. We're all called to do different things. And when it comes to the space of advocacy and activism, there's so much performative activism that happens. When people see, oh, you are passionate about this thing, I should be passionate about this thing because it's a trendy thing right now. It's trendy to talk about Black Lives Matter, or it's trendy to talk about gun violence. But what we need to do is center those people who have those experiences. And you need to create space for yourself in the spaces that you have those experiences as well, because that's where you can make the most change. The people who are going through the same traumas and the same pain that you once went through need you to be that leader. They need you to speak up, and they need you to represent yourself and your experiences confidently and own them. It's the realness and it's the authenticity, it's the rawness that allows us to have human connection. We live in a digital age where my friend Andrew Roth says, we're all digital captives. We're captivated by social media and technology. We don't necessarily want to be on Instagram and TikTok all day. We don't necessarily want to have to do all of these different, ways to connect with each other, be on our phones all day, but we're captivated by social media. We're captivated by technology, and we lack those spaces of genuine human connection because we don't have spaces to be empathetic. We don't have spaces to be compassionate. We hide behind that mask again. We hide behind that mask when it comes to social media. We can be whoever we want on social media, but what happens when you're talking to someone who's a barista at a coffee shop and they have a bad day and you're having a bad day, and you can just smile at them and you can show empathy and you can show love in your heart instead and just ask them how their day is going. Then you've opened up a conversation that's so much deeper than just ordering a coffee drink. It's about creating that connection with every single person you meet, because every single person, again, is a mirror to who you are and to your pain and to your trauma. And it can be the next bridge that creates that story of triumph for you. Or another person, because it's not about ourselves at the end of the day. It's about who we impact and the legacy that we leave. It's so much greater than us. Our experiences are not only our own, but they're shared. I want to leave you guys with understanding that love is not our weakness, but it's our strength. Having that compassion, that empathy, I know I'm sounding repetitive at this point, but I want you to go home and Google the definition. What is true empathy? What is true compassion? What does it mean to lead with love in your heart? Not only love for others, but love for yourself. How do you create that safe space for your inner child who's still hurting? How do you create that safe space for your little brothers, your little sisters, your parents who are still who still have that inner child that are still healing, your teachers? It's so much greater than ourselves. We need to have compassion in our hearts in order to create space for people. That psychological safety is essential to creating spaces of community, and community creates trust. That consistency in character and that courage, that boldness that we can possess when we're empowered and we're inspired by our lived experiences and we don't allow it to stifle us is what liberates our peers. It's what liberates our family members. It's what breaks generational curses and systemic issues. You can't look at advocacy work and activism as this is my only outlet. Because not only is it your outlet, but it's going to be the outlet that sets millions of people free. And you may never see the harvest of the seeds that you plant. You may never see it. I started my organization through a leap of faith. Simply a leap of faith of saying, you know what? I know everyone's telling me that I shouldn't do this protest, but I'm going to do it. Because it allows me to have that space to talk about what has happened to me. I was someone who loved school growing up, and it wasn't until I had experiences of racism from my own teachers that made me feel like I would never be successful. It wasn't until I had people who I thought supported me and loved me and wanted to pour into me tell me that I couldn't do things that I felt smaller. But it was that one leap of faith and trust in those experiences that made my experiences valid, that allowed me to start this organization where now we teach a curriculum centered around youth agency. We teach a curriculum centered around service and creating our lives, making our lives about serving others, making our lives about community advocacy, using art and creativity as a way of generational healing, not only for ourselves, but for our families and our future children, our little brothers, our little sisters, people who are looking up to us, and the people who are older than us and looking down to us and saying that we can't accomplish things. This is an intergenerational approach to activism. It's through empathy, it's through love, it's through leading with love. And I want you guys to all, thanks. I want you guys all to know that starts within yourself. That starts within having that love for yourself, having that love for those experiences, healing that relationship you have to that pain, to the people who hurt you, to the trauma, having forgiveness. It's difficult. Sometimes we need to forgive ourselves for being so anxious and being so worried and always being Debbie Downers in community spaces. But it starts with those hard conversations, that space of empathy where we love ourselves, that we can actually love on others. I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for sharing space with me. And I hope you all understand that you are you're so worthy, you are so capable, and you are so called. Not only to make change for yourself, for your communities, but for the generations that are to come. Thank you.
Can we show some love for both Tiana Day and David Hogg. And I promise you, they will be joining us again later, I promise you. But good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Goldsmith Barzilai, and I'm the Assistant Vice President of Global Initiatives here at Kean University. And I'll tell you what I was sent out here to do. I was sent out to give you guys a test today. What do you, a little bit of groans, right? I've come on stage to give you a test today. But I'll tell you, I'm going to bring out a friend to help me give this test. I'm going to bring one of the fabulous Gen Zers who work here at Kean University. So I'm going to ask my friend Faith Clark to come and join me. And I'm going to tell you, Fab Gen Z, I'm going to tell you how I give a test. I give a test with prizes. Faith, can you tell me, what is it called when we give a test with prizes?
A Kahoot.
A Kahoot,
Obviously.
all right. So that means I get to announce, you didn't know you were going to hear this today, I get to announce phones up. Phones up. Everybody take your phones on out, right? Phones up. Right? We're going to pull up that Kahoot. Give us just a second to pull that on up. Right? Now, we've got some fab prizes for everyone. It's not often that we're asking you to pull out the phones. I do want to make sure you know we're going to take a minute to queue it up right here. But we're going to be asking a whole lot of questions to make sure you've been paying attention. Who's been paying attention? Who plans to win those prizes? Okay. Now, I don't know if you know that you've got some competition. We're so full here, we have a whole nother building with another 250 students, and I think they're going to give you a run for their money too, right? So we're going to take just a moment as everybody knows how they do it with the Kahoot, right? You know technology. They're pulling it up right now. Faith, we've got some, are you assuring me that we've got some good prizes here?
Very good prizes, I'm telling you.
Okay. All right. You guys know how it's done. Come on, QR code now. Pull up that QR code or go to Kahoot it, right? I want to see those numbers. I expect to see 900 of you up there. I love it. I love it. Keep it going. Keep it going. Wow. All right, come on, get in quickly. I don't want to miss anybody. Numbers are still coming in. Now remember, it's going to be all about what you've learned today, so I hope you were paying careful attention. All right, let's give it another 10 seconds, and then we got to get started, right? Keep going, keep going. Listen, if you need to team up with someone sitting next to you, that's okay. I can see the numbers are still coming in. We're over 400. How are you guys doing on this side? How's it going on this side, right? You getting in? Show me. Okay. You know what? We just keep going. If it's not loading for you, partner with the person next to you. We're overloading Kahoot. Okay, let's hit 500. If it's not loading for you, we're going to play again. We're going to play again. This is just our first Kahoot. But keep trying because I can see people are getting in. When we hit 500, I think we got to go. So partner up, partner up. Beautiful. All right, all right. Okay, come on, 5 more and we're gonna go. Okay, everybody ready? And Faith is gonna help me out with this. All right, let's go. What birth years are considered part of Generation Z?
1999 through 2012, 1985 through 1998, 1995 through 2005, or 2000 through 2015.
Okay, everybody. I love the excitement in the room, but we can't even hear the next question. Good job. I'm going to go with the next question now. Great job. All right, let's see who's got it. Ian, good job. David Hogg is the co-founder of what organization? Every one of you got to get this right.
Habitat for Humanity,
everybody.
March for Our Lives, Dance for Justice, or Students for Change.
Great job. Great job. We already have a close game between Philly and Dominic. All right, let's go to our next question. Let's keep it going. Okay, everyone? The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was established to what, Faith?
Represent all humans, protect fundamental human rights, promote better standards of life globally, or all of the above.
Spencer takes the lead. There is nothing I like better than to see a group of young people this charged up about a human rights cahoot. Let's keep going. At what age did Tiana Day organize California's largest Black Lives Matter march?
17, 14, 16, or 19 years old.
At just 17, Spencer is still in the lead, but he's followed closely by Mac Elm. Where's Spencer? All right, you still got the lead, Mac. Mac, you're coming close. All right, next question. Let's keep it going. Which of the following is one of the common causes that both David Hogg and Tiana Day advocate for?
Healthcare, LGBTQIA+ rights, gun violence protection, or disability justice. They're fast with the answers.
They're good. Did you expect them to be this excited about it, Faith? Let's see what we've got. Gun violence protection. Let's see if Spencer holds on to it. Medina and Mimi take the lead. Medina and Mimi. All right, next question. Let's keep going. Who is the 24-25 Senior Human Rights Fellow for Kean University?
Keanu Reeves, Greta Thunberg, Indaba Mandela, or John Prendergast?
Let's see if Mimi and Medina can keep it. I don't know, Spencer might be hot on their heels. Let's see. It's Indaba Mandela, grandson of Nelson Mandela. Medina and Mimi are still in the lead, still taking the lead, but Mac, you're close behind, Mac. You're very close. Let's get our next question. Let's keep it going. Which of the following is not one of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals?
Peace, justice, and strong intuitions, renewable energy, public policy, or sustainable cities and communities?
What was the right answer, Faith?
It was public policy.
That's right.
We're getting the harder questions now.
Next question. Okay, we're close. Did I mention, before anyone gives up, did I mention that we have 3 prizes? So you can still get in those top 3 spots. In what year was the Human Rights Institute established?
2000, 2008, 2011, or 2021?
Faith, what's the right answer?
2008.
Let's see who's in the lead now. Oh, Mac Elm's doing good. All right, everybody. Last question. Let's do it. What human rights issues matter to Gen Z?
Healthcare access, economic security, civic engagement, or all of the above and so much more.
All right. I don't know. It's tense. Are we ready? Faith, you ready to reveal our 3 winners? Faith is going to reveal our 3 winners. Let's see what we've got.
Josh H.
Josh H. Josh in 3rd
Brooke.
place. Josh, do we have you? Brooke and
Mac Elm. For the winners, I have prizes for you, so I'll come and I'll find you, okay?
Fantastic. Thank you, Faith. Listen. All right, we're not done. We're not done. Don't worry. Later on, we're going to bring those phones out again. I appreciate that enthusiasm. That was fantastic. Okay, now. You can see what's happening behind me here, right? We're moving into our next section of our program. All right, I know. Whew, whew. Everybody's heart's racing. But now, what I want to do, I actually want to bring our speakers back out to join us, right? But you know what I call this, right? So this is known as a fireside chat, but you know what I like to call it? I like to call it the hot seat. So let's see if we can get Tiana and David to join us in the hot seat. Let's bring them on out. But in order to help me in the hot seat, I'm also going to bring out another fab Gen Zer, right, who works here at Kane University. If Rashad Khallout will come on out and join me.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. Thank
Now,
you, Jessica.
I want to explain, and you're going to see Rashad again later. I want to explain just real quick to David and Tiana what we're going to do real quick here, okay? We want to get to know you guys a little bit better, right? We want to get to know them a little better. Sometimes it's good to hear what they have to say first thing off the top of their head, right? We don't even want to give them a chance to think about it. So what we're going to do, what Rashad's going to do with you, he's going to do rapid response. So you guys are going to take turns, but we're going to have you each answer each of the questions. They have no time to think. Let's get to know these guys a little better. Rashad, can you hit them with some rapid response?
All right. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? That's what I like to say. That's what I like to hear. So, starting off first, Tiana, dream vacation destination.
Ooh, Italy.
David.
My own house.
All right, David. I felt that. Staycation. So, David, how many hours of sleep do you need?
7.
Followed by Tiana.
9.
I need like 5. So, David, once again, what is your favorite hype music? My what? Hype music, you know.
Oh, I love movie soundtracks.
Wow, I just saw Novocaine the other day. What's it called? Tiana, you're up next.
Jazz.
Okay. All right, Tiana, would 12-year-old you think you were cool today?
I would think I was so cool. I would want to be her friend.
David, what about you?
Probably.
I love it, probably. All right, Tiana, can you tell us, who would you spend an entire day with? Anybody in the world?
My sisters.
Oh.
2. I love them.
You're better than me. David, you're up next.
My sister. Singular.
That's so sweet. Y'all both are better than me. So, David, what year in history would you like to travel to? This is
Probably 2008.
Okay.
And the
Tiana?
Obama campaign.
2008 also.
Same. I like to shake his hand. What's it called? David, if you were a superhero, what would your superpower be? I just watched Invincible.
What would my superpower be? Probably teleportation.
Okay. No commuting for you. Tiana, well, you're up next.
I would want to read people's minds.
Ooh.
Can I change my answer?
Oh my goodness. Wow, I love that. I have power of persuasion personally. So, Tiana, future goals in 5 words or less. Go.
I want to open up a school. 6.
Oh. 6. You want to? Yeah, we'll make it. I'll take it. Okay.
Open
David,
up a school. Open up a school.
Yeah.
There you go.
David, you're up next.
I want to, when we eventually end gun violence, I want to retire and be a college professor.
You know, Kane is hiring. What's it called? So, Tiana, who challenges you to be better?
My fiance.
What? Wow. Lucky girl. What's it called? David, you're up next.
My sister.
Aww. That is so sweet. All right, David, what achievement are you most proud of? There's an obvious answer, but there's a you answer.
Helping pass the first federal gun law in 30 years.
Woo!
All right, Tiana, take it away.
The fact that I stopped being afraid of my trauma and I started using it as my method of power. Healing journey.
Period. What's it called? Last question, but definitely not the least. Tiana, first word that comes to your mind when you think of Gen Z.
Innovation.
David.
Anger.
Ooh. And that concludes this today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rashad. Fantastic. Okay.
That was fun.
Now, well, we're not done with you guys yet. Thank you, Rashad and Faith, and we'll be bringing you guys back out in a little while. But now, we have some additional questions for you guys. Now, these ones you can take a moment to think about. So, we have so many schools participating today. We actually have 30 schools participating. So we wrote to your schools and your teachers, and we asked for questions in advance. So we have some questions that are coming from teachers and from students, and we want to ask you some of the questions that were repeated. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and let's see what you've got for us. Still in the hot seat. So a few students wrote to us and said, it can be difficult to speak up about topics when everyone has different perspectives. It can be hard in your classroom, it can be hard with your friends, and even with your family members. How do you recommend speaking up with confidence without the fear of hurt or rejection? To either one of you first.
I would say to stop putting the stress on yourself. If you're called to make a change, again, like I was sharing earlier, then it's not about yourself, it's actually about the people that you're going to impact. And so I talk about this what if phase. What if I do this and everyone looks at me and they laugh at me because I look dumb? Versus what if I do this and people actually feel empowered because of my action and because I was able to take that first step of faith. That like leap of faith is what stops so many people from pursuing their purpose, and they end up in careers that they don't love. They end up in spaces and places and colleges and just situations that don't even resonate with what they feel they're called to do. So don't let the fear be your motivation to stay stagnant. I would say use that as flip the script and be empowered by the fact that you kind of maybe feel some kind of way, because know that other people feel the same way, but you can be that catalyst of change.
You know, it's hard sometimes to know the best way to make change, but it is not hard to know the best way to not make change, which is that the easiest way to get nothing done is try to make everybody happy, ultimately. Your job, in activism and leadership, it is very important that you listen to everybody's perspective and what they have to say, but your job as a leader is to pick a direction and understand people may not agree with that. They may not think it's a good idea, but ultimately, the consequences of that decision, regardless of whether or not people agree with it, it's up to you. You're a leader. You have to make those decisions. And I think also when you're making change, Parkland is a Republican town. It's very conservative. The students are more balanced, but it's a very conservative town. A lot of my neighbors did not and do not agree with me that I grew up around. If I relied on them as my source of like validation that I'm doing the right thing, that I can continue doing this, I wouldn't be able to do it. You have to have a really solid group of people around you that you do rely on to call you in if you do mess up or you say something wrong or something like that. But ultimately, really rely on that select number of people rather than people just what they say online that don't know you, or people who assume things about you or don't know who you are. The only person who knows why you're doing something is yourself. And ultimately, that's what matters. If you look at activists throughout human history and world history, they are often very hated in the time that they're alive. Very, 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 very hated. But it's ultimately, if they didn't stand up because so many people didn't agree with them, we wouldn't be the world that we are today, in the good ways at least. But we need more good people to stand up, because when the bad people stand up, they don't care what other people think. They don't care how they hurt other people. We need the good guys to stand up a hell of a lot more, though, and fight just as hard, because unfortunately, this is one of the hardest truths about life. It doesn't matter if you're doing the right thing, if in politics at least, if you don't have the power to accomplish that thing, right? If that makes sense. You need to have both. You need to be doing the right thing, but you need to be as well organized, if not better organized, than the people you were organizing against.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to stick with something you said. You talked about good people and bad people, or good messages and bad messages, and people knowing you or not online. We got a lot of questions, as you can imagine, about social media. Both of you use social media to raise awareness of your causes, and you use it to promote engagement. Social media can be so negative. How do you maintain peace and positivity despite that? How do you make sure that your platforms stay as positive as possible?
I take frequent social media breaks. I used to be someone who felt the need to share everything, and I would get a lot of backlash for that. And it was great in the beginning because it built momentum for me. But as I got older and I got more secure within what I'm doing, I didn't feel the need to fight all the haters every single time. I didn't feel the need that I had to stand my ground. I'm like, you're coming on my page to talk about me. This is my page, this is my territory. And I can just delete the app sometimes when I'm overwhelmed. And it's hard to do, it's easier said than done, right? But I started practicing, okay, I'm gonna go 24 hours without social media. I'm gonna go 2 days without social media. And then I just did, in January and February, 2 months without social media. And it has been able to keep me grounded and present in my day-to-day experiences and really practice what I'm preaching, right? Talking about human connection, it forces me to call someone on the phone or text my friends and check in on them. No one was doing it to me, because I'm not, it's out of sight, out of mind. But I'm really trying to practice what would it look like for me to be more intentional with the way that I engage with people, my community, and the students in my organization, the teachers, and the people that I'm able to impact. So I tried to take that approach to it, and it's honestly helped my mental health a whole lot to take those social media breaks and make it a consistent practice that I start to implement. Because like I mentioned earlier, we're digital captives. We're the generation of digital captivity. We're glued to our phones, and it can definitely be a power. It can definitely be used for our power and for good, but it can also be used and it's been harmful. And for me, I've experienced more of it being harmful than it has been positive. So I try to limit myself and create boundaries surrounding my use of social media and why I'm using it. I think that influence without impact is profitless in any business, in any organization, in any way that you're trying to make some change. If you're on Instagram or you're on social media and you want to be an influencer, understand that people are using you because they need you to make an impact, whether you're selling a product or trying to convince people to do one thing or another. It can be used as a vehicle for us, but we have to understand, what are we doing with this vehicle? Where is it taking us? Because if it's just taking us to the ground to tear each other apart, then it's not profitable. It's not something that's useful. It's not something that's going to enhance our lives, but it's going to deteriorate them instead.
I think with as bad as things are today, you don't always need to be positive on social media, right? After the shooting, we went out there, and I was extremely critical of the Republican Party. I was extremely critical of the Democratic Party, because frankly, neither had delivered in the way that we needed them to, because these shootings continue to happen. And when you're talking to politicians or you're calling them out, a lot of the time, the only thing they're going to respond to is an immediate threat to their power. Ultimately, the one thing that they all share in common, no matter how bad or good they are as people, is that they want to remain in their position of power. I used to say myself, the only good politician is a scared politician. And to some extent, that's true. Not scared of violence, obviously, but scared of losing their power. That is the thing that they care most about. And calling out a politician on social media for taking money from the NRA, for example, that's not a bad thing. Is it a negative thing? Yes, but it's needed, because that is the one thing they will respond to a lot of the time. What I will say, though, is that you shouldn't always be negative, because people will get burnt out. And one of the ways that we've done that with the work that we've done in March for Our Lives is making jokes about these very powerful people. So for example, the NRA made a video about us one time that was it probably cost $1 million or $2 million to make. And it was this video with their spokesperson where she was saying these Hollywood-funded, basically implying that we're crisis actors without saying it, are here to take our guns and your time is running out. And she very dramatically and stupidly flips an hourglass, right? We were TV production students, so we bought an hourglass for $20 and made a spoof of their video that said the exact same thing, but about how they're a conspiracy to enable gun violence to continue in this country, because they know the more shootings there are, the more guns that they sell, because people become afraid. And that video cost us $20 instead of $1 million, and it got way more views than theirs. It made a good point, and it was also hilarious because it was a 16-year-old in that video, doing a parody of it. So use humor when you can as well, because if we're just constantly negative, we're going to burn out. And the other thing that I would say too is I think the point that you make about taking breaks from social media is really important. You need to understand on the internet, if you are using a service for free, you are the product. These companies do not care about you. They are there to do one thing, which is extract as much value from you and as much time from you as possible, no matter what the consequences are on our mental health, your anxiety, your depression, or anything else. And I think that there's a broader conversation that we need to have as a society about regulating social media. Because in my opinion, it's effectively mental cigarettes for young people. And I really think... I also think it is a very destructive tool in that it is so much easier to just talk about everything that's wrong in the world, right? Guys, that is the easy part, is to talk about what's wrong. That is the first step to changing the world, but the other 10,000 steps you have to take are what are you going to do to make it better? So ask yourself when you're posting things, if you're criticizing a politician, tell them what you need them to do better. Because if you just say you suck, it's not going to be very productive. It's not going to get you anywhere. You have to tell them what you want them to do and how you want them to improve. And if they don't, for example, our government doesn't change its gun laws, I think it's time to change who's in government and bring in some more young people, frankly.
Thank you. And to echo what David just said, at the end, we'll make sure that we have a call to action so that you leave with all this information and you leave inspired and you say, well, what do I do now? How do I keep this conversation going? But I do have one more question I want to make sure, because we got this question a lot from educators. We have a lot of teachers and professors in the room. As educators, we are motivated to support our students in creating a more just world. What tools or skills do you think teachers possess to help our students create this world? It's some of what you've touched on, but if you'd speak directly to our teachers.
I would say, this is cliche, given what I just presented, but really tap into empathy, really tap into your own lived experiences and show your humanity to your students. I was the kind of student, again, that was disengaged. I was literally the kid in the back of the classroom with my headphones on and my hood on, and I would look at you if you tried to tell me to do something. And that's because most of my K through 12 experience, I was undiagnosed with ADHD, and I really struggled to grasp information the same way that my peers did, and teachers didn't check in on me. They just looked at me as that disengaged kid in the back who, we don't know what to do with her, she doesn't care, she's not turning in her homework. And it wasn't until I learned during COVID, there's other ways to enhance my own learning. I learned best through films, I learned best through, for example, history. I learned best through watching a documentary. I learned best through studying an article or listening to a podcast, and those resources just weren't available for me when I was in the classroom. So I would say for teachers, try to put yourself in your students' shoes, and it's very difficult because you have so many students, right? You have so many people and brains and people you're trying to be therapists to, but also administer the curriculum and do this and that. But sometimes there's just a level of rawness and realness that students need to understand you are also human. Sometimes we see these people as power dynamics and we feel detached from them. But in the same sense, we can do it the opposite as educators. We can feel we're so far removed from the students, but remember that everyone is human at the end of the day, and they have feelings just as we have feelings. My organization, Youth Advocates for Change, actually has a program where we do professional development programs for trauma-informed and lived experiences for teachers to better understand their students and enhance student agency and leadership in the classroom. So I encourage any teachers and educators out there who are seeking those solutions that to come and talk to me afterwards or find us, and I'm happy to consult or to share some resources that have helped, but my passion is literally allowing educators and teachers and students to have a symbiotic relationship in the classroom and allow them to really enhance student agency, encourage students to lead, encourage students to serve, and create an environment and a school climate that not only helps teachers feel that they're understood, but also makes students feel that they're understood. So that's a resource I want to just share with you guys.
I think a lot of it is having conversations with students about what issues matter to them and helping guide them as if they want to work on addressing those issues, helping guide them and mentor them as they're doing that, and just asking, what can I do for you as your teacher? How can I serve you? And I think with that too, I think every school in America should have, I think every student in America should have to take at least 1 year of speech and debate. And I know that there's a lot of people that are afraid of public speaking, but I would not be in the position that I am today because I too have ADD and I have dyslexia. I joined speech and debate because when I was younger, I was very insecure about my ability to spell properly. It took me a really long time to learn how to read, and I really struggled. And I decided to join speech and debate because I wanted to be able to roast my classmates better. And I thought, because I wanted to be able to defend myself when they would make fun of me. And you can imagine my surprise when I tried out for speech and debate, and I thought it was going to be like, what's better, like, apples or oranges? And they asked me, like, okay, like, what should the U.S.'s response to Boko Haram be? And, other questions about foreign policy, gun control, things like that. So I highly encourage you all who are students in this room, which is most of you, like, please join a speech and debate class if you can. If you don't have one, try to create one. You don't get to pick which side you argue on. You have to argue on both sides of issues. And it really forces you to think differently about them. And I think it is so productive and helpful to people. So definitely try to have more of those classes. If you ever are elected as a younger person, get your teachers paid more as well.
I want to add on super quickly to what you were saying is teachers can also create those opportunities in their own classroom. Like, I like to also bring up the idea of, like, we can actually create a lot of innovation in the classrooms by, maybe you're a science teacher, maybe you're a history teacher, but you can create a space of debate and public speaking opportunities in the classroom for your students. And so I really want to encourage everyone to think more innovatively and creatively about how we teach, because we can integrate these critical thinking skills, these soft skills in the classroom every single day if we just get a little bit more creative, a little bit more innovative.
As you can imagine, it is not easy to be in the hot seat, so let's give another thank you to Tiana and Dave. And
thank you.
For now, we're going to dismiss them for now, although we're going to have them join us in our activity, but we're going to bring you guys out again later. So I'm going to have you guys step out, but let's give them, again, we will have the chance to thank them again. Thank you. And I'm going to bring up my friends Faith and Rashad to join us on the stage again. Now, even with speech and debate, it is not easy to just take questions on the fly like that, so that's pretty amazing, I must say. I want to tell you what we're going to do next. There aren't prizes. Okay, but you're all getting swag before you leave. You'll all get Kane swag. There aren't prizes for this activity, but listen, this conference is about hearing what matters to Gen Z. If you're Gen Z in this room, raise your hand. That means we want to hear from you. Pick up those phones. Pick up those phones. We want to understand what matters to you and to how you're communicating, what you're listening to, and we want to be able to say that we've polled over 500 Gen Zers. So please join in. This is going to be good, and it's going to be quick, but we want you to have the chance now to speak to us, right? We need to know what issues matter to you. So let's get phones up, phones up, phones up. Right? This is important. Your voices are going to be heard now. So we can say we polled over 500 Gen Z students, and this is what matters to you. Let's get those in quickly. Come on, phones up. All right, we're going to give it another. All right, this time we're going to give it another 10 seconds. You guys were faster last time. Let's keep it going. Again, without prizes, this is a chance for you to be heard. Come on, I got to see us hit 400. Got to see us hit 400. Keep it going, keep it going. Faith and Rashad, you think it's going to be, you think they're going to do as good a job as they did on the last Kahoot?
I think they're going to do a great job, Jessica.
All right, let me see some more numbers. 5 more seconds. We want your voices, your Gen Z voices.
You're going to look good.
Okay, we're at 393. Come on, 7 more and we go. All right, as soon as we hit 400, we start.
Oh, wow.
All right. 399. All right, let's start our Kahoot. This, no right answer, no wrong answer. This is Gen Z voices. We want to hear from you.
Click fast.
I'm going to ask a question. Faith and Rashad are going to. What is your favorite social media platform?
Ladies first.
TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, or Blue Sky?
Ooh, Blue Sky is new. It's a Twitter of his. I never use it.
What do we got? Not unanimous, but
Wow.
we've got TikTok.
What's y'all favorite dance?
Next question. Next question. What topics should Gen leaders be focused on? We want to hear you. What topics?
Sustainability, entrepreneurship, mental health and wellness, or advocacy?
Tell us what you think. These are your voices.
Mental health and wellness.
Okay, next question. Next question. Hi, Mike. Great job. What word comes to mind when you think of human rights?
Freedom, policy, equity, or justice?
What do we got?
All right.
Justice. Justice with close by freedom. Next question. We're doing good. Okay. If you could spend the day with a human rights activist, who would it be?
Nelson Mandela, Malala Yousafzai, Rosa Parks, or George Clooney? Malala. Malala.
Rosa Parks. Okay, next question.
Oh, wow.
Next question. What superpower would you choose if you could choose one?
Invisibility, time travel, mind reading, or flying?
Mind reading it is. Mind reading. Next question. We're getting there. Next question. What is the first word you think of when you think of Gen Z?
Proactive, resilient, empathetic, or powerful. Claudia. Hi, Claudia.
Easy, powerful. Powerful took it away. Okay, we ready for our last question? Ready for the last question, everybody? Let's go to our last question. Okay. What song are you listening to now?
Hot to Go.
Not Like Us.
DTMF.
Or Messy.
It's a nail biter. What do we got?
Not like us.
Beat your not the Bible if God watching. Sometimes you gotta pop out and show. Certified boogeyman, I'm the one that up to score with him. Walking down whole time, I know he got some him. Pull on him, extort, bully the flow on him. Say Drake.
Okay. Gen Z has spoken. Gen Z has spoken. And while we're excited and enthusiastic and inspired and upbeat, I want to make sure that you get excited and inspired about all of the exciting things happening here at Kean University. There's not someone better who could help us out with this than our Senior Vice President, Dr. Mike Salvatore, who's going to come on out to the stage, and he's going to tell you a little bit about Kean right now. Dr. Mike. Just turn it on. I turned it off. Got it?
Okay, good morning and welcome to Kean University. Give it up for Kean. Well, we are excited to have you here today, and I have about 7 minutes with you. How many of you have been sitting for more than 20 minutes? Stand up for a second. Everybody stand up for a second. Stand up, stretch it out. Oh, yeah. Stay up, stay up, stay up. Stay up. All right, while you're standing, everybody, here's what I want you to do. It's a quick assignment. It takes 30 seconds. So I'm somebody who firmly believes that when you're in a particular space, that there should be an experience for everybody, and you should have some impact. So what I want you to do, how many know the phrase bucket list? Have you heard that before, the term bucket list? Something you really want to do. I want you to take 30 seconds. And I want you to talk to the person next to you, or think in your mind, if you want to be quiet, what's on your bucket list? 3 items, bucket list. Go ahead. 30 seconds. Ten seconds, 10 seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bring it up here. Okay. If your bucket list item as high schoolers had something to do with travel, have a seat. Oh, wait a second. We're losing everybody. Hold on. We lost. Okay, something to do with travel. Have a seat. If your bucket list item had something to do with having an impact, whether it be around justice, whether it be around exploring something, helping other people, inventing something, have a seat. Have a seat. We lost almost everybody there. All right, so gentlemen, one of you, the 3 remaining, give me one item that you had up here that I didn't mention. Oh, If your bucket list item was meeting somebody inspiring, like you mentioned LeBron James, okay? If your bucket was meeting somebody, have a seat. Have a seat. Okay, one more. What was yours? Go ahead. Oh, if it had to do with spending time with your loved ones. Very nice. Have a seat. And if you're still standing, let's give those standing a round of applause. We're going to get to you in a second. Have a seat. Have a seat. Okay. So let me tell you something. How many of you are juniors or seniors in high school? Raise your hand. Most of you. Okay. This message is going to be almost directly for you. Anybody shopping for colleges at this current moment? Yeah, give yourself a round of applause if you're shopping for your next experience. Yeah. Well, here's what I want to say to you. When you think about your bucket list items, make sure that's on your shopping list for colleges too. So many of you wanted to travel as an experience. If you're looking for colleges like Kean University, let's say you wanted to come to Kean University, everybody. Okay. If you're looking for a college experience, you've got to look for what's in the DNA and the culture of the institution. Here at Kean University, if you were to attend Kean, and many of you have applied, some of your bucket list items are right here. Let's talk about a travel of culture. It's not just about studying abroad. We have that here. It's not just about another campus on the other side of the world in China. We have that here where you can visit. We have an extraordinary culture around travel here, which half of you sat down and said that was on your bucket list. The travel is something we call Travel Learns, where we bring students all around the world. In fact, last week, we had students in South Africa walking with Nelson Mandela's grandson, Indaba, who many of you have met in the fall, right? Pretty cool guy. So we had students in Iceland last week. We have students in Central and South America, all over the country. We have a culture here of travel, and I know I have a really tough job because last week for work, I had to go to Bermuda. It was tough job. Kean has a culture of travel which is second to none, so when you're looking for your next stop in education, make sure it's a place that you could scratch some items off your bucket list. And the other piece, where the other half of the room almost sat down, was around impact. We just received the Distinguished Research R2 designation. What that puts us in a classification with only a few hundred other colleges, and there are thousands of colleges. It allows you to come here and investigate things that matter to you in your community, whether it be the government of your community, the educational system, the commerce, what's happened, the policy. And I saw some of your answers on Kahoot, and some of you are really interested in that. At Kean, you can scratch off two of those things. If you want to have an impact upon your community, the place you live, or the broader world or the region, Kean University has it here for you. So if you're shopping, make sure you can scratch a couple things off your bucket list. A great culture of travel every year if you want it, and an opportunity to have an impact on the world. And here I'm going to show you a quick video before I leave the stage about what Kean has to offer to you. It's nice meeting you, everybody. If you haven't applied for Kean, visit our website, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Welcome to your world-class education, where access meets opportunity. Kane's motto is Cougars Climb Higher, because our students do great things, and we'll be with you along this journey. See you soon, and welcome to Kane.
Welcome to Kane.
欢迎来到肯恩大学。
Welcome to Kane.
Maligayang pagdating sa Kane.
Welcome to Kane.
أهلا وسهلا تفضلوا لكين.
Welcome to Kane.
Bienvenidos a Kane.
Welcome to Kane.
Thank you. So is everybody learning a lot today? Yes. So now I have the privilege of presenting to you our Human Rights awardees for the year. Are we ready to get started? Great. So the first two awards are our annual Outstanding Human Rights Activist of the Year awards for two individuals who need no further introduction, David Hogg and Tiana Day. You can go this way. Oh, you want him to stay there? Our next award is for the Outstanding High School Student Human Rights Activist of the Year, Josie Nuzzo. Josie Nuzzo is a student at Kittatinny Regional High School who tirelessly inspires her peers to be an upstander through her leadership at the school's on-site Holocaust Center, the only one of its kind in New Jersey. Next, I'd like to call on our outstanding Kane University student human rights activist, Rashad Kalut. Rashad earned his undergraduate degree from Kane in 2023 and is currently enrolled in Kane's Forensic Psychology Master's Program. Rashad has served as president of PRISM, a service specialist intern at the Lesniak Institute at Kane, and is currently a College Steps lead mentor at Kane University. Next, the Dr. Hank Kaplowitz Outstanding Human Rights Educator. And I want to point out Dr. Kaplowitz standing here. He's the founding director of the Human Rights Institute. Kate Oakson was nominated by the Holocaust Resource and Education Center's Teacher Advisory Committee for her commitment to human rights education in the classroom and community. She challenges her peers to examine their pedagogy to be as inclusive and representative as possible, bringing in themes and histories that reflect their students' unique lived experiences. As an art teacher, she brought the same philosophy into her own classrooms. Kate is an inspiration. And with these inspiring awardees on stage right now, it is time for a call to action. There is so much energy and excitement in this room today. I thank you all for that. Give yourselves a round of applause. And we at Kane's Human Rights Institute call on you to pledge to leave here today and take action. I want everyone to think of an idea, a topic, or a theme. Find what human rights issue ignites your passion personally to drive you to make change. Take it in, digest it, and next week, share it with 3 of your peers, family members, friends, teachers, anyone willing to listen. There are more than 1,000 of you here today at the conference. If each of you gets just 3 people to consider the importance and the ability to make a more just future, that is how you keep the enthusiasm going. Now to some exiting updates and lunch notes. To help us put on this important program, we need your input. Scan the QR code behind me to fill in our post-event survey. Your voice matters. Thank you for joining us today.